The young woman puts on a nightgown and her new high heels. She gets up and goes to the mirror to take a closer look. She has a beautiful figure. She has a mature look. The long lonely night made him sleepless. Then he went to the window and gazed across the room. Suddenly a beautiful sight came into view. She was mesmerized by the boy's muscular body. It was as if he was calling out to him right now. The woman tries to suppress her urges, unaware that the boy had also noticed his eyes. The moment they look at each other, they see each other. The woman thought that this was her middle age. What she doesn't expect is to become someone else's lamb for the slaughter. Mary is a high school language teacher. She's an old lady but still has her charm. He and his son were just about to go out one day. The lock on the garage door was jammed. Just when Mary was in a state of uncertainty, suddenly a big hand helped her out of her predicament. We found out that the man was Paul. He was a new neighbor who had just moved in. Mary's heart was racing. She couldn't help but feel an inexplicable affection for the sunny boy in front of her. She felt an inexplicable affection for the sunny boy in front of her. From then on, Paul came into her life, especially because of their common interests. They found a place in each other's hearts, but neither of them ever broke through the barrier. Until this day, Mary, sleepless and unable to stop thinking about Paul, she went to the window again, but instead, he saw a blood-curdling scene. He was in a state of shock. He tried to numb his loneliness with alcohol, but suddenly he received a call from Paul. He had tried to bake chicken wings in the microwave, and he made a mess. Mary was in tears. She rushed over to help him with his meal. At the dinner table they have a good conversation. As the storm raged outside, the room was filled with the scent of ambiguity. Mary sensed that something was wrong. She gets up and prepares to leave, but Paul stood in his way, even though Mary had said no. But her honest body betrayed her, and so it was. The two men and women, more than 10 years apart, came together until the next morning. Exhausted, Mary woke up in bed, realizing that she had done something she shouldn't have done last night. After all, brother-sister relationships don't end well, so she pulled up her trousers and tried to leave. But Paul, who hadn't had enough, wouldn't let him. He didn't think age was an issue at all. The two of them were perfectly capable of moving on. Mary still couldn't accept being with him. She turned around and left with a vengeance. But what she didn't expect, what Paul does next, is something she never expected. Late at night, lonely and isolated, Mary could not resist the thought of Paul. She moved by magic to the window to spy on the room opposite. Since that encounter, Mary's heart had been ignited, but unbeknownst to Mary, that this love affair would lead her into the abyss of ruin. The day her son returns from a visit to her ex-husband's place, at his insistent request, the ex-husband stayed over for lunch. But just then, Paul, who was a ghost, came uninvited. This sends a shiver down Mary's spine. She played it cool and kept her distance from Paul. She had no idea that Paul had deliberately touched her shoulder in front of her ex-husband. Touched her on the shoulder. This blatant flirtation was a major turnoff for Mary. But that wasn't all. In the evening, her ex-husband brought up the subject of remarriage to Mary, and at that moment Mary wanted to leave Paul. So she agreed to her ex-husband's request. Little did she know, Paul, who was next door, watched this scene. The next day the ex-husband had just left. Paul suddenly appeared in his car, and he started to yell at Mary, as if he was her real husband. Mary is furious too, but this was just a small warning from Paul, the son who doesn't know right from wrong, seeing his mother arguing with Paul, and instead of listening to him, he blames his mother for being rude to his only friend. He then got into Paul's car and took off. This made Mary feel scared. He regretted that he had been too quick to do so. There was no turning back now, but she didn't know yet. This was the beginning of the nightmare. After that, Paul became even more reckless. He followed Mary around in his car all day, sending flowers to his office every now and then. He even went so far as to play poker with Mary in the toilet. He even tried to force him to play poker in the toilet. Fortunately, after Mary resisted, she was able to escape Paul's clutches. But Mary's resistance also angered Paul. He hung an artistic photograph of himself and Mary. He hung them up in the schoolroom. Mary is furious at Paul's insane behavior. She finally decides to go to Paul and confront him, and told her to stop harassing her. Paul outwardly agreed. When Mary left, her expression immediately changed from emotion to gloom. The image of her with him kept flashing in her mind. She was on the verge of a breakdown. She couldn't accept the loss of the woman she loved, and so an even crazier move was made.